I used to take photos for like hobby. My grandfather had a Rolly Magic, my dad had a Kodak Brownie, and when I was working, I was also involved in a film processing lab, and then I quit the job and decided to be a photographer. I grew up in a place which had a lot of Westerners traveling, and I used to be fascinated by why they come to India, what they get up to and all that. And I traveled to Puri and Varanasi and all those places, and I did some pictures of these foreigners. And I showed it to a friend of mine who used to work for a newspaper called Hindustan Times, which is a national newspaper. And he said, "Do you mind if I show this to my editor? We might run a photo essay." And I said, "Sure." And the next thing I know, I've got a double-page spread, center spread with my byline, and they paid money for it. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. It's something I love doing, and you can get paid for it. So that was my moment of revelation, that you can get paid for something you love. And then I started selling my prints to tourists, started being like a stringer for Times of India. If something happens, they ring you up. Not ring you up in those days, there was no telephones, but in India, where you get a message, somebody cycles up to you or send a messenger or. Well, working for newspapers was quite an education because you get trained in all aspects of photography. 1 minute you might be doing a news job, next minute you doing pictures of food for a restaurant review, then you doing some portraits of author or whatever person they want to feature in. I think the most jobs I really enjoyed where you got to spend time and really got into the more sort of documentary projects were more exciting for me. In the beginning, photographing famous people was a bit of a buzz, but that wears off very quickly. I came to the UK in 1993. Took me some time to find my feet. For first 2 years, I was a full-time dad, so that was another exciting, and that gave me foray into worlds where I wouldn't normally walk with a camera, because having a baby on your backpack, you are almost like okay. I met my partner backpacking, and in the end we realized the long distance thing is not going to work, so I came over here. Look, in any society, because of the cost involved, equipment, film, processing, is always been a forte of certain privileged people. Same in England, photography has always been a sort of middle class, upper class pursuit, mostly white. So that's a different story as a person of color to get into the mainstream. That's another struggle. Sometimes I felt like, the imposter syndrome, like everybody had a degree in media and documentary photography from Newport and blah, blah, blah. I'm self-taught. As a picture editor for newspapers, every day in your feed you get thousands and thousands of photographs. You have to very quickly make a decision, what stands out. The eye has kind of get very perceptive and trained to pick out the best. I have seen amazing work by other photographers, especially photojournalists, conceptual photographers, and even now, every day, in my feed comes images from many, many countries. You can tell from the photograph where there has been a connection between the photographer and the subject, and it's not voyeuristic, and it brings out the depth and the emotion. They easily stand out, My first inspiration for, photojournalistic and documentary photographer was an Indian photographer called Raghu Rai. He's the only Indian photographer who's got a Magnum membership. He used to work for India Today, and he's done some amazing work. He's photographed many famous people. He's even done a book on Mother Teresa, which I quite like. He was just following her, constantly photographing whatever she was doing. And one day she asked him, why you constantly keep taking pictures? And he said, why you constantly keep praying? So what's prayer to you, photography is prayer to me, that's why I keep taking pictures. I quite like Henri Cartier-Bresson. A lot of documentary photographers. Kodolka. Sometimes I wonder about the ethics, because I've taken a photograph, a magazine has bought it, but then I'm thinking, what did the people in the photograph get? For example, he's won millions of awards with that picture of the Afghan girl portrait he did with his piercing blue eyes and National Geographic and all that kind of stuff. But what did that girl get? They found out that she was in some refugee camp in Pakistan, and he went back and re-photographed her, and there was some kind of fund generated to support her or something. No, but that's just like one example, Street photography, documentary photography, I just take the picture and then ask. And sometimes you make an eye contact and you have that kind of acknowledgement. But especially in West now, it's getting more difficult and difficult because of the global data protection regulations, consent. But technically, if you are in a public place, you can photograph. But it's always polite to ask if you are actually doing some portraits, When you're covering a very sensitive situation, which can be emotionally traumatic, as a professional, you have to complete the job to best of your ability, keeping aside your personal feelings. I've been into situation as a press photographer where you're photographing quite devastating scenes, but can be quite emotional. I went to cover a story for Western Delhi Press of a man from Cheltenham. His body was found hung in some weird rural area in Maharashtra, and I went with their reporter. There was two sides of the story, so the family had also turned up, but the person who got implicated the family was claiming that they've just been framed just to end the story because there's a foreign national involved. I had to capture the emotions from both the sides. It was quite conflicting. You don't know who to believe or who not to believe. You have to keep your emotions and your own judgment aside and just focus on the professional aspect of it. Seeing images from Gaza or Ukraine or Rohingya camp in Bangladesh or Darfur in Sudan, all this is heartbreaking, But you have to keep that aside and still choose, that image is quite poignant, that is not, I'm going to get rid of that, I'm going to get rid of that. Yeah, it's professional and personal has to be aside, or you don't do the job. I can show you the project I've been working on, series on grief. His only son, he's 93 years old man, his only son had died 2 weeks ago. and he talked about it, and it's quite pathetic. It was cathartic for me too. As a human being, we all deal with grief. Talked about her PTSD, and how it's affected her life, and so that's from the series on grief. She's bipolar, and first time not everybody tells you, but it is a privilege that people trust you and tell you, what they really are. She told me the most difficult part is accepting one has a mental health issues. It works both ways. It's cathartic for me too. So I can relive those emotions of my grief, my loved ones and all that kind. So there is already a connection established, and that's what makes people comfortable to be photographed. Trust you to tell you their innermost secrets or be themselves. I find it quite amazing.